Welcome everybody, welcome to the Sonic Lab. If you're not familiar with the place, the escape hatches are there and there, is that correct? Yeah. Please turn off your mobiles, being very careful that you don't drop them to immediate death below. What else should I say? This is being live streamed, so I hope you're all aware of that or have been made aware of that. So, you'll also notice I'm being a bit cautious around the stage because we have a sort of on-off relationship. But let's talk about Paul. That's what we're here to do. Paul brings to academia two qualities which it seems to me are crucial for its survival today: indiscipline and underplanning. This is no joke. Let me elaborate a little. The considerable indiscipline which informs Paul's approach to the role of a professorship of music is ultimately the originary principle of the university. The clue is in the word, university, an institution which contains everything, the universe, preceding the subdivision of that everything into neat disciplines, subject areas with boundaries. In the current climate, there's a lot of talk of interdisciplinarity, without necessarily much precision about how this is achieved. Instinctively, Paul is wary of boundaries. But the label interdisciplinary doesn't do sufficient justice to the level of radical rethinking which he's prepared to bring to his work. To mention just two of his many research projects, one collides three elements. One, his conviction that his background in theatre and performing arts is a key to the fruitful communication of big ideas. Two, a knowledge of spatial acoustics considerably enhanced by his period working here in SARC. And three, a concern for the training of medics, informed by the experience of post-surgery care of brain injury patients. Think of that. It's a beautiful conjunction of theatre and operating theatre, to both heal minds and to change them. The second project brings his love of and facility in improvisation to bear on another apparently unconnected area, the conduct and training of lawyers working in difficult cases involving children, predominantly child abuse cases in Northern Ireland. I've witnessed lawyers mind blown by how the techniques pioneered by Paul and his team have affected their competence as communicators. For those of you who are unaware of this work and the immense impact that both projects have had on worlds of activity apparently far from that which might be thought the concern of a professor of music, I imagine you're thinking, this is pretty implausible. But thinking the impossible is what Paul does well. He brings considerable rigour and a lot of passion to bringing together ideas and people from apparently distant reaches of thought and practice, such that they can mutually benefit to an extent that many of those involved are initially frankly sceptical about. But this, which I'm calling indiscipline, on the basis that it exceeds the easier management speak goal of interdisciplinarity, is one of the most potent intellectual insights in a period of malaise and meaninglessness where we are now. Of course, it's not unprecedented. 25 years ago, the AI pioneer and philosopher Philip Agre wrote tellingly about what was holding back his discipline. Artificial intelligence would never develop as a field, he wrote in an article about what he called critical technical practice, because all those in the field used the same language, shared the same assumptions, built on the same concepts. Unless this siloed field of knowledge started listening to the outliers, to those on the periphery, it would wither and die. Music, listen and learn. The second quality I identified in Paul was underplanning. Paul is an improviser, by instinct and by practice. The fact that he can find his way around an Excel spreadsheet better than any other academic I've ever met, and fully understands the principles of investment and return, doesn't alter the fact that Paul understands fundamentally that the primary human mode of organisation is not planning, it's improvising. Being subtle, adaptable, resourceful, empathic, and above all, imaginative in response to the situation in which one finds oneself. This informs his teaching, his practice as a musician, and his thought more broadly. This too is far from intellectually unprecedented. Anthropologist Lucy Suchman writes of the manner in which most human plans transmute into improvised responses to real-world situations. Paul brings this insight to the center of his work and life as a crucial counterbalance to those in universities who think they can plan their way out of the current situation. Management, listen and learn. Finally, I'd add that Paul is a true friend, a generous wellspring of human support and crucial passion in a cynical world. He can still believe in things totally. Sometimes I disagree with him about them. Sometimes we even shout at each other about stuff. But the shouting always goes away, and we are left listening to each other with enhanced respect. I guess I should do that now. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Paul Stapleton.
Thanks, Simon. Love you, buddy. Thank you. Oh, it's great to see so many familiar, wonderful faces. But I must admit that I'm a bit uncomfortable with this whole situation. Since my early teenage years, I've had strong anti-authoritarian tendencies, which my dear mother, who is watching online in California, knows all too well, as do my various managers over the years. And I now find myself in a position where I'm being recognized as some kind of authority, resulting in a weird feeling. Weird in the Mark Fisher sense of the word, as in the presence of something that should be absent. But ultimately, I'm grateful for this opportunity. And not just because I like the excuse to bring together many of the people I care about for a bit of a party, but also because this is an opportunity to have, for me to recognize the role that many of you here in the room and watching at home have played in making possible the work that I do. My work has always started from the premise that I can't do anything meaningful on my own. I was once told that I was lost in collaboration, but it is precisely this virtue, precisely the virtue of this kind of getting lost with others that I want to focus on today. It will come as no surprise to some of you that as an improvising musician, I advocate for cultivating an openness to the unforeseen and unforheard, and an attentiveness to the other. And by the other, I mean human beings with different backgrounds and points of view, but also non-human beings, including musical instruments and places, with which I can enter into a relationship that is more than utilitarian in nature. I've long felt a resonance with some of the writings of the philosopher Martin Buber on this subject. Please indulge me while I read a passage from one of his most famous texts. I contemplate a tree. I can accept it as a picture, a rigid pillar in a flood of light, or splashes of green traversed by the gentleness of the blue-silver ground. I can feel it as a movement, the flowing veins around the sturdy, striving core, the sucking of the roots, the breathing of the leaves, the infinite commerce with earth and air, and the growing itself in its darkness. I can assign it to a species and observe it as an instance, with an eye to its construction and to its way of life. I can overcome its uniqueness and form so rigorously that I recognize it only as an expression of the law, those laws according to which a constant opposition of forces is continually adjusted, or those laws according to which the elements mix and separate. I can dissolve it into a number, into a pure relation between numbers, and externalize it. Throughout all of this, the tree remains my object. It has its place and its time span, its kind and its condition. But it can also happen, if will and grace are joined, that as I contemplate the tree, I am drawn into a relation, and the tree ceases to be an it. The power of exclusiveness has seized me. This does not require me to forgo any of the modes of contemplation. There is nothing that I must not see in order to see, and there is no knowledge that I must forget. Rather, as everything, picture and movement, species and instance, law and number, included and inseparably fused. Whatever belongs to the tree is included. Its form and its mechanics, its colors and its chemistry, its conversation with the elements, and its conversation with the stars. All this in its entirety. The tree is no impression, no play of my imagination, no aspect of my mood. It confronts me bodily and has to deal with me as I must deal with it, only differently. One should not try to delude the meaning of the relation. Relation is reciprocity. So the type of relationship Buber is describing here can take many forms, some of which may be familiar in our experience of loving or perhaps in moments of curiosity. Crucially in Buber's work and in my own experience, it is these moments of reciprocity, of acting and being acted upon simultaneously, in which creativity is possible. And this applies to art forms such as music, but also more broadly to the making and remaking of our individual selves through our relations with others. The feminist theorist and physicist Karen Barad makes a similar argument when discussing the entanglements that give meaning to matter. Existence is not an individual affair. Individuals do not pre-exist their interactions, rather individuals emerge through and as part of their entangled interrelating. Likewise, post-humanist and ecofeminist scholar Donna Haraway employs the concept of sympoiesis to point to how we make each other and the worlds we inhabit together. Sympoiesis is a simple word. It means making with. Nothing makes itself. Sympoiesis is a word proper to complex, dynamic, responsive, situated historical systems. It is a word for worlding with in company. When thinking about how this applies to music making or other forms of collaboration, I like to think of improvising bodies. This is not just a collection of individual bodies or independent people, places, and things working together, but a larger body made up of all these agents and ingredients, where each part can make a meaningful difference, but no part is in total control. So what does this sound like in practice? In the second part of my lecture, which will take up most of my time today, I want to give you a glimpse into some of the improvising bodies that I've been lucky enough to be part of since starting my job here at SARC. Indeed, SARC itself has been a significant player in my own story. And this includes the place and this space that you're all in here today. It's looking slightly different there with no speakers. As well as the many encounters I've had here over the past 16 years. I also feel proud to be part of the history of music at Queen's, which predates SARC by many decades. For me, this photo, which my wife Brona found, articulates an admirable ethos taken in 1977 of Professor David Greer and electronic musician Adrian Thomas with the first EMS synthesizer on the island of Ireland, along two acoustic instruments with early music roots. Notably, the serpent in Professor Greer's left hand was made by a student during their studies at Queen's. So I've been teaching instrument design for a while. The discipline of music more generally can be distinguished as a mode of cultural activity going back to antiquity, as well as an ongoing driving force behind technological transformation and social change. Music is both studied and practiced within and outside the academy, and the boundaries of the discipline are continually being redefined. Music at Queen's as a collective body has continued to adapt accordingly. The music that was playing when you first walked into the room was an extract from a concert by my trio Ints Ect at the University of California, San Diego Department of Music. The concert was on the 22nd of October, 2019, the last date of our California tour, at which some of my family were present, including my grandmother on her 99th birthday. The group features Simon Rose on baritone sax, Adam Pulse-Melby on double bass, and me on some of my own musical instruments. Here's another short extract from that concert. So originally, I learned to play music on the violin before taking up the guitar. And these days, though, I mostly play instruments I've created, often built in collaboration with others. Pictured above is the bonsai sound sculpture, or BOSS for short. It's the BOSS. The BOSS is a portable modular musical instrument that I made in collaboration with furniture maker Neil Fawcett in 2010. It combines a repurposed turntable, DIY electronics, amplified metallic percussion, and strings. It brings together aspects of several acoustic, mechanical, and electronic instruments that I played for many years, and places them together in new combinations and new relationships. Portability was a really important design constraint when I was making this instrument. I bought the case first and made sure that the whole thing was under 20 kilograms so I could take it on Ryanair and EasyJet and various other discount airlines. And that's a real important factor if you actually want to collaborate with other people and play in different places. Some of the instruments I built previously were you need a truck to bring around, and this one had to be air portable. So this was the first instrument I played with Simon and Adam. And I played with them both in duos and in larger groups in Berlin and elsewhere before forming our trio, Insect. The instrument I was playing with Insect in the recording you just heard on our California tour in 2019 was the volatile assemblage, or AKA Vola. This is an image from an earlier version of the instrument from 2018. It keeps changing, and it's basically develops and changes for different types of collaboration in different contexts. It's development of the BOSS, the previous instrument, and it's entirely battery powered. It's the carry-on version, and that includes amplification. And yeah, it allows me to play in even wider variety of contexts. So when building such instruments that operate at least partially in electronic and digital domains, I'm often guided by the importance of touch, tactility, and coordination between sound and movement commonly found in acoustic instruments. So why am I wearing socks in this photo? That's actually the case with the speakers built in, some transducers, and I can feel the vibrations of the instrument coming up, often even before you can hear it, through my contact with the instrument, through the touch. This relationship between sound and touch is also present in my interfacing with the Vola through a variety of familiar and less familiar tactile means, so bowing, beaters, cappuccino whisks, spinning hard drive plates, various things like that. This focus on touch is a priority I share with such people as Sally Jane Norman, Michelle Weissovitz, and Joel Ryan, as well as many of my colleagues here at SARC, including Simon Waters, who's written on this eloquently in several different places. So from SJ and Michael and Michelle and Joel, the problem in too much academic music of the 60s and 70s was precisely a loss of trust in hands and ears. In addition to the importance of touch, many of us at SARC are also guided by the ability of, or fascinated by the ability of instruments to exceed their design briefs. Designing musical instruments for creative musicians is unlike other forms of design that are focused on helping product users consistently and reliably complete a task. Tasks like making a phone call, or even more skilled tasks like keeping an airplane in the air, where predictability is rightly encouraged. In contrast, when a musician plays an instrument in an overly functional manner, without the addition of their own personal style, their playing can be described as robotic. Or if they're playing styles too similar to the style of another, they risk being labeled derivative. Crucially, music making values difference over sameness. And some of the most memorable musicians, for me at least, are the ones that extend the instrument-musician relationship in ways that the designer could never have imagined. Jimi Hendrix with the electric guitar is an obvious example. Likewise, Adelphi Sax, the inventor of the saxophone, could not have anticipated John Coltrane's music. Creative musicians are perhaps better described as abusers rather than users of instrument designs, which manifests through their explorations of the edges and breaking points of both sound-making materials and culture. Another example of musicians exceeding the intentions of the designer can be found in the practice of turntablism. This is a practice that spread across many decades in musical contexts, including work from such artists as Grandmaster Flash, Christian Marclay, Philip Jacques, just to name a few. This practice includes the scratching of vinyl records through articulated hand movements on direct drive turntables and a DJ mixer, and as is common in hip hop, or modifying records through less conventional means, such as with the use of razor blades or through reassembling record fragments, as in the example from Christian Marclay above. My own instrument design and performance practices are shaped by this history. The Vola includes a turntable and modified 7-inch vinyl records alongside a virtual turntable, pictured here, comprising an upcycled spinning plate from a computer hard drive as a means of interfacing with an embedded computer in turntable-like fashion. So here's a video example of Vola in action, taken actually by Miguel, wherever you are, on his phone, at a piece I called Uncertain Rhythms at the 2019 NIME conference in Porto Alegre in Brazil. Perhaps you might recognize the source tune, or perhaps not, we'll see. Stevie Wonder. So in my duo Insect with Ricky O'Raw, we improvise live remixes of modified 7-inch vinyl records combined with performance on and sequence samples of custom-made instruments such as the Vola. Our collaboration collides Ricky's background performing with electronic dance music groups such as Not Squares, with my own noisy textural improvised music making, without attempting to fully resolve the differences between our two distinct practices. Here is a short extract from our co-authored essay that accompanies our first album, pictured above. So our improvised performances seek to engage with a specific social arrangement of sounds and bodies that circulate at different ends of the art music, popular music spectrum. Improvised music can easily be classified and dismissed as an oddity consigned to esoteric experimental music establishments. Electronic music can just as quickly be labeled inane and left on the dance floor. With this project, we wanted to exist in a liminal space where those we encountered were neither alienated nor passive. We wanted to make the club strange. If I had more time, I'd ideally play you one of the full sides of this record. But as time is limited, I will play you just 2 short extracts and followed by a slightly longer extract, which should give you an idea of how the music develops. Let's hear the first extract. So this clip should give you a sense of where some of the improvisations sometimes begin, with the layering of predominantly acoustic materials. Let's hear the second clip. So gradually, rhythmic fragments are discovered and developed, becoming motifs which in turn fade away or get enveloped in chaotic noise, out of which other forms emerge. Here is one such example in a slightly longer clip. Hope you enjoy. So Ricky and I have continued to develop our duo collaboration, most recently for performance at the 2023 edition of the NIME conference in Mexico City. That's where we are pictured above. If you'd like to catch us playing in Belfast, you can come along to our SARC lunchtime concert, shameless plug, in this room on the 29th of February, for which Connor McCauley, sitting there, will join us on drum kit to form a new trio. So 29th of February in here. Right, so this next section, just to note, parts of it come from a co-authored chapter with Simon Rose on sympoiesis and improvisation, which we published in a forthcoming book by Simon. This chapter includes several narratives from our previous collaborations across and beyond different disciplinary contexts, including my work with lawyer and legal scholar Sarah Ramshaw, who is now based at the University of Victoria in Canada. I first came across Sarah Ramshaw's work on improvisation in law during 2010 through reading her article in a journal published by the groundbreaking research project in Canada, now known as the International Institute for Critical Studies in Improvisation at the University of Guelph, of which SARC has now become a partner. In her article, Sarah problematizes commonplace views on the role of precedence and spontaneity in Western law and jazz, what on the surface may seem like unlikely bedfellows, or strange bedfellows even. At the heart of her argument is that law can have no claim to justice unless it attempts to adapt generalized knowledge to specific cases, and that improvisation in music demands this as well. The circumstances of each trial are unique, and while the actions of the accused are judged in part by their commonality with the past actions of others, reaching a just outcome requires the ability to pay attention to the specificities of the case as it unfolds. Put another way, a trial where the outcome is known in advance is not a fair trial. Like in improvised music, an openness to unpredictability is necessary for just improvisation. For me, the resonances between law and music in Sarah's texts were compelling, as they offered a way to widen the conversation about improvisation across and beyond disciplinary boundaries. How might an understanding of improvisation in the practice of law provide different insights and actions in music-making practices, and vice versa? Might improvisation become a meeting point for better understanding how social practices are coordinated more generally? And might the differences that matter in such practices be less about disciplinary distinctions and more about how we participate together in singular events? I decided to write to Sarah, and I was surprised to find out that she was based in the law department here at Queen's. We'd been living here together for many, many years, but had never met. I promptly invited her to give a seminar at SARC in this room as part of our Music at Queen's event series. This led to a co-authored book chapter and a successful funding bid to launch the Translating Improvisation Research Group, which organized talks, workshops, concerts, and other research events at Queen's from 2013 to 2016. The activities of the research group provided us with a robust foundation on which to practically explore concepts such as listening, anticipation, adaptability, cooperation, risk-taking, constraint, and contingencies in disciplines as varied as dance, anthropology, psychology, and architecture. Building on the work of translating improvisation, in 2014, Sarah and I were awarded an Arts and Humanities Research Council grant for a project that focused on the role of improvisation in child protection law sector in Northern Ireland, which allowed us to expand our team to include some wonderful people, pictured above. And so that's Matilde Morellis, Adnan Marquez Bourbon, Catherine McNeely, and Seamus Mulholland. The project facilitated exchanges between locally based family law practitioners, including judges, barristers, social workers, third sector workers, and the critical studies and improvisation community, the latter of which is a growing international network of artists, researchers, and higher education institutions, as well as professional organizations who share an interest in improvisation as a transdisciplinary social practice. Another project which involved improvisation in and across different domains was Reassembled, Slightly Askew, an autobiographical artwork based on Shannon Sickles' experience of falling critically ill with a rare brain infection and her journey of rehabilitation with an acquired brain injury. Audience members experienced Reassembled individually, listening to the audio via headphones while lying on hospital beds. Reassembled was made through a 5-year collaboration with an interdisciplinary team of artists led by Shannon Sickles, also known as Shannon Yee. She was the writer and performer. And the team included myself as composer and sound designer, Anna Newell as director, Hannah Slutney as dramaturg, Stevie Prickett as choreographer, Matilde Morellis as project support, and as the project developed, we also brought on Shannon's consultant neurosurgeon, Roy McConnell, and the head injury nurse, Colin Williamson, who treated her while she was in the Royal. The project also involves several actors and musicians. Pictured here are Isabel Anderson and Kit Philippa. Development and production was made possible through a Wellcome Trust Arts Award with additional support from the Arts Council in Northern Ireland, SARC, the Metropolitan Arts Centre, and the Arts and Disability Awards Ireland scheme. Our work on the project began in 2010. I was approached by the director, Anna, to get involved in a new artistic collaboration based on Shannon's extraordinary medical experience. I had worked closely with Anna previously when she ran the Interdisciplinary Arts MA here at Queen's before she went on to continue her career as a theatre director. From our first artistic team meeting, it was clear that to tell the story, we'd be required to think and act differently, to improvise, not just musically, but also at the edges of our different disciplinary knowledges and personal experiences. We developed a collaborative language that would allow us to move beyond conventional forms of audio-based dramatic narratives, for example, radio dramas. The role of the body was key, as this was both, as the piece placed the audience inside Shannon's body, experiencing the world from her point of view. We aimed less for a play about brain injury and more for what Shannon once described as my brain injury ride. Anyone who's danced along to a beat is familiar with the physical reactions that sound can provoke. One of the challenges we addressed in this work was how to harness the sensations produced by sound and music to provide audiences with empathetic and embodied understanding of Shannon's life-threatening illness, the trauma of rehabilitation, and her subsequent hidden disability. Here, I'm simulating the sound of a craniotomy with a cabbage and binaural microphones. Despite the serious subject matter and intense development process, the project was also a huge amount of fun. Not just because I was able to try out things like the above, but also because of the great team that was involved. Our team's focus was primarily on making an artwork, improvising together, experimenting, taking creative risks, and I'm delighted by the critical acclaim that Reassembled, Slightly Askew received, which helped the work tour in arts festivals across the world, from Canada to Hong Kong. Unexpectedly, through our focus on developing this first-person sound-based form of narration, the work started to reach other audiences that were also interested in experiencing Shannon's story, including in medical training contexts at places like Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. Reassembled, Slightly Askew is an improvising body that has continued to reach places that I could not have predicted. So, slight segue, still in the realm of improvising across and beyond disciplines. In 2018, I started a reading group with my colleagues Martin van Walstein and Matthew Roger. Martin has expertise in physical modeling synthesis in the context of virtual acoustic instrument design, which involves real-time computational simulation of acoustic instruments. Matthew's research expertise includes the study of perceptual motor coordination in music performance and other activities involving the dynamic coupling of sound and movement at ecological scale. The purpose of our reading group was to share literature from our various disciplines, in this case, music, acoustics, and psychology, with the aim of better understanding how we might work together on the design of new musical instruments. I collaborated separately with both Martin and Matthew on several occasions before this. When I first started working at SARC back in 2007, Martin and I identified an affinity between the sound worlds of my sound sculptures, some of which are pictured there, and his physical models, particularly those based on the coupling of metallic plates and strings. I was practicing on my metallic tromba marina in my office, which at the time was directly below Martin's. He came downstairs to investigate what he thought was a great sounding physical model, only to discover that my unusual sounding instruments were actually built out of acoustic materials. Another example of my older acoustic instrument designs is the modular sound sculpture, aka the MISS. Both this and the instruments from the previous slide were created with the furniture maker Neil Fawcett when I worked at the University of Central Lancashire in England. My first encounter with Martin in 2007 started a conversation in which I learned much from him about the potential of his approach to numerical sound synthesis and how this might be applied in the context of improvised music making. Rather than focus merely on replicating the sounds of existing acoustic instruments through physical modeling, Martin and I developed a shared interest in the creation of virtual acoustic instruments that could be both tunable and playable through real-time parametric exploration to create acoustically familiar, yet also uncanny sounds. Put another way, imagine being able to play a piano-like sounding instrument which you could dramatically change its acoustic qualities while you were performing it. How would a piano sound if it was small enough to fit in your hand and made entirely out of brass, versus if it was the size of a house made out of clay? What might it sound like to move between these and other more subtle musical parameters over the course of an improvisation? This line of thinking led me, Martin, and our PhD student, Chandra Mejias, to create VASPI, a virtual acoustic string bridge plate instrument designed with a level of richness and complexity that we hoped would be of interest to improvising musicians. I'm going to play you a short extract from an explorative musician study we ran with VASPI. Sorry, yeah. So Matthew, not pictured above, and I met shortly after I started work at SARC in 2007 as well. I had a somewhat naive comprehension of ecological psychology at the time, but from the many conversations with Matthew that followed our first meeting, I gained a much richer understanding of how his field could be employed to better understand the dynamics at play in the performance of improvised music. In 2013, Matthew and I began supervising PhD researcher John Dyer, resulting in several experiments and publications in the area of human movement sonification for motor skill learning. Concurrent with John's PhD project, Matthew and I collaborated with Adnan Marquez Bourbon on the creation of the RK box, pictured above with John Dyer modeling. The RK box was a new musical instrument specifically designed to study how student musicians learn to adapt to changing movement sound mappings. It was at this point that I thought it might be beneficial to start using Martin's physical modeling algorithms in our instrument designs with Matthew to provide musicians with a richer and more complex sonic landscape for exploration. Martin and I had also reached a stage in our research where we wanted to deepen the evaluation of our virtual acoustic instruments with a focus on how improvisers learn to play these instruments, for which Matthew's particular expertise seemed invaluable. During our interdisciplinary reading group session in 2018, we formulated the question, what makes a good musical instrument? While we recognize the absurdity of this question, if the aim is to give a single definitive answer, we nevertheless felt it is worth reflecting on what exactly an instrument is and how instruments contribute towards meaningful musical experiences. When approached in this way, the question has continued to raise complex issues that we feel are best addressed when combining a range of perspectives. For this reason, in 2019, we expanded our project team to include Miguel Ortiz and Laurel Pardue, which led to the design of a new proto-instrument named Voron, which was presented at the NIME conference in 2020. Unlike some of our earlier virtual acoustic instruments, the parameters of Voron are not adjusted by turning knobs. Instead, musicians explore the behavior of the physical model by interacting with a pressure sensor array in a similar way that they would interact with a drum skin, applying pressure to dampen the sound or bend the pitch, not unlike the tabla played in North Indian classical music or the boran played in Irish traditional music, but with different sounding material characteristics, again, often metallic, and as an example I'm about to play you. So this is a short example from a different study, explorative music study that we ran with Voron. Here you go. It's funny that the two study participants who remain anonymous are sitting very close to me at the moment. So our research team has since grown into the Music Ecology's Design Lab, or MEDAL, an interest group at SARC that explores questions relating to the design and performance of musical instruments and the environments within which such practices are entangled. So the pandemic, I have to mention it, sorry, was a challenging time for music making and music research. Gigs were canceled and studies involving human participants, like the ones I just played, were abruptly halted. But it was also time for exploring different types of musical relationships and making different types of improvising bodies. One such body was Three Body Problem, or 3BP for short, which I formed with Adam Pulse Melby and John Bowers. 3BP was somewhere in between a band, an emotional support group, a breeding ground for unresolvable philosophical speculations, as well as an often humorous but still very serious strategies for long-distance collaboration. We played together regularly during periods of lockdown, connecting from our homes in Belfast for me, Newcastle for John, and Berlin for Adam, through a variety of configurations, intertwining us and our instruments with the internet. I had done something like this in the before times, nearly a decade previous with Tom Davis in our duo project Ambiguous Devices. My work with Tom also briefly features in the following 5-minute extract from a video essay titled The Virtual is Material, Music Improvisation in Post-Digital Ecologies that I co-authored with Adam and John. So I'm going to play you that now. This is about 5 minutes.
It's after the end of the world, don't you know that yet?
3BP is born in and of the pandemic.
Following is my account of the trio Three Body Problem. Despite being born in and of the pandemic, for the purposes of this presentation, I draw the timescale differently. Roll tape.
It wasn't always this way. Decades ago, I engaged in distributed online performances, not out of necessity, but out of curiosity. In 2011, Tom and I began to grow weary of this approach to music making, but decided to persist, focused on the transduction of action to movement, from the striking of beaters against metal plates, driving motors, spinning abused vinyl records, pulsating magnetic pickups, driving solenoids, striking metal plates, driving motors, spinning records, and so on, creating promiscuous feedback loops that resonated through all kinds of materials, including acoustic objects, badly engineered lines of code, misused communication protocols, wires on the ocean floor, the air, our hands, and our ears. And while this work was fruitful, I realized that I actually preferred performing in a co-located manner, with a co-located audience, and for a while I stopped engaging in distributed online network music making in favor of forming more localized networks of musical relationships, such as with Adam and Simon, traveling together from gig to gig, exploring specific sites, including a World War II-era communication bunker in Berlin, extending feedback through underground tunnels, gated by heavy doors, repurposing old communication wiring, and listening carefully to what together we became. But all the while, the virtual remained material, mattering in multiple senses of that word, providing resistance, confronting me bodily, co-constituting virtual lines from the past into the conditions of infinite futures, after Elizabeth Gross. Karen Barad, after Niels Bohr, argues that apparatuses are not mere instruments serving to focus our attention on the object world, but rather they help constitute and are an integral part of the phenomena being investigated. Furthermore, apparatuses do not simply detect differences that are already in place, rather they contribute to the production and reconfiguration of difference.
From the beginning.
Power works by offering one temporal sequence as the temporal sequence, when in fact there are multiple temporal sequences for different people who are differentially located, whether as particles or waves.
Yes. It's after the end of the world, don't you know that yet? As Sun Ra says.
Calling planet Earth, calling planet Earth.
3PP is born in and of the pandemic.
Accounting for apparatuses means attending to specific practices of differentiating and the marks on bodies they produce. Here John and I are making music together for the first time, not yet in lockdown, not yet living the absence of that which should be present, what Mark Fisher, after Sigmund Freud, calls the eerie. We are not yet three-body problem, becoming but not yet born. Stapleton and Bowers have been responding to lockdown under COVID-19 through a series of tragic experiments. Their principle has been to floridly exaggerate and overcome the difficulties of remote online interaction that is confined within a video frame, shaped by audio compression and noise reduction algorithms, and often in tension with the peculiarities of domestic spaces. And how our suffering is multiplied, they connected to each other with several video conferencing systems and other networked audio applications simultaneously, creating multiple feedback routes which challenge their domestic bandwidths, while placing algorithms in adversarial relationships. They intended this work to be a hellish, yet hilarious, microcosm of contemporary sonic suffering. It went better than expected. Adam joined the band.
One moment, let me just see if I can actually capture the attention. I can't capture the attention. I'm losing out yet again to...
Networking music apparatuses are eerie, and that they confound any possibility of a shared here and now. Yet this is where we find ourselves, together, in and of the uncanny virtual bridge that connects our pasts and futures.
So, so that was a 5-minute extract from a 16-minute long video essay which was published in the Body, Space, and Technology Journal in 2021. For those wondering, the dog in the video is named Fingal, and he is a very good boy. I would like to end my lecture by playing you 2 recordings I made as part of Constructing a River, a project led by Mathilde Morales and Chrysulo Durakaki, with a bit of context in between. So I'll play the first clip. In Constructing a River, Mathilde and Chris use field recording and photography to explore different perspectives on the River Lagan in Belfast. The work frames the area between the Weir 2 and the mouth of the river. At the center of their account is the Lagan Weir. The Weir is a river maintenance facility which includes a large, highly reverberant room under the river, pictured above. Mathilde and Chris composed field recordings and a series of postcard photographs from under the river and above ground, which came together as both a book and a multimedia website. As part of the project, Mathilde and Chris invited me to perform an improvisation on my trombone marina in the Weir in response to the sound and visual materials they produced, an extract of which you just heard, which was included as part of their release. Before I play you the final clip of my performance on the trombone marina recorded in the Weir, it is worth describing the improvising body formed through this work in a bit more detail. So the trombone marina, sometimes called the trumpet marine or marine trumpet, is originally a medieval instrument. It's a monochord or a one-string instrument that you play by bowing and touching the harmonics on the string. It was still popular up until the early part of the 18th century, when it was largely, but not entirely, killed off by the widespread adoption of equal temperament tuning. My version was created in collaboration with Neil Fawcett, pictured above in the blue lab coat. Instead of wood, we made it out of stainless steel. Again, there's a trend with metal here. With a different bridge design and a larger resonance chamber, but similar shape. A lot of other principles were carried over in the design. So I've developed a relationship with this instrument over the past 20 years, but I've also learned quite a bit from watching other people play it. So I've lent it out and seen other people play it, including a couple people that are up there. Another interesting part of this improvising body is the actual space, the acoustics of that space. It's highly reverberant. If you're standing in there, it's so much reverb that you can't even have a conversation. So as you speak, the sound comes back over and overlayers on itself, and it takes quite a while for it to disappear. In addition to space, there's also the place and the narrative of that place, as told by Mathilde and Chris's organization of sound and images taken from the river. Another crucial part is my friendship with Chris and Mathilde, pictured above, characteristically looking away from the camera. You may have noticed Mathilde popping up in many of my collaborations, including in Reassembled Slightly Askew and the work of the Translating Improvisation Research Group. She also designed the Insect logo, my website, and has made countless other contributions to my career and my general well-being. Thanks, Mathilde. So this is not a comprehensive account of constructing a river, but it should give you some idea of the many actors and ingredients involved in the dynamic processes that is in this body of work. All and more shape the virtual realm of possibilities of this improvising body. But what actually takes place in a given moment when encountering this work can sometimes be something more. The sound of this piece confronts me bodily, like the river from which it was conjured. What I am faced with is not simply a collection of my past experiences, and while those remain with me, I am confronted with a physical presence in the present moment. one which provides an invitation to embrace the open uncertainty of our future together. Thank you. Thanks very much to Craig, Johnny, Ashley, and the rest of the technical team here. They've been incredibly supportive, not just today, but throughout my whole time here. And thanks for all of you for coming. The good news is there's drinks outside, and I've been told lots of cheese and other stuff as well to eat. So there will be a reception for the next about hour. Please drink up, and I'll come and chat to you in a bit. But thank you all.